I came to Verona April 17th, 1935. I bought the George McKee barber shop. And that was in the Schumann building. And Verona had a lot of business places then for a small town. And I'm going to give you the location and the names of all the people that were in business at that time. We start on the south side of Main Street, and the first business place there was really a little farm by the name of Blizzard, and he still peddled milk. He had a horse and a kind of a cart, and he had the milk in bulk. He'd go to the house and he'd dip it into the people he was giving it to. The only one I ever saw do it to it was Mrs. Schumann, but it was kind of odd. I had never seen that before. Well, next place would be the butcher shop, and that was run by I'm pretty sure there was a couple by the name of Hanson. And that was the only thing south of the railroad tracks. On the north side, of course, they had the railroad, the Wisconsin, the depot, and next to that was the H.J. Nicholas McCormick Deering. They had tractors and what have you there. But they also had a place in Madison where they sold parts, and Hank and his wife run that, and Rudy Woodrick run the place in Verona. Across the street on Railroad Street, Boy Batker had a garage and he sold Ford cars, and Joe Batker had the blacksmith shop. I don't know if they're in the same building or the same area there anyway. And then west on was the auditorium. Well, that building is still about the same as it was then, except it's been remodeled. That was run by Andy Clark, and he had probably the biggest bar in this part of the country, that is outside of the city. He built a bar that was really nice, and he got the crowds in there, especially on Saturday night when they had free movies. They brought in a lot of people. Now, across the street was the Farmers Co-op, and that was a good-sized building, and they did big business. They had 3 or 4 guys worked there besides the manager, so it was probably one of the biggest operations outside of the stores in Verona at that time. And something I mustn't forget to mention is the Hartland Verona Gravel Company. They were in operation at that time, and they shipped their gravel, most of it by railroad. And they had quite a crew of men that probably were the biggest employer at that time in Verona. You go back on Main Street, there was a Petoskey Bar. That building is still there, but it's been changed. And then was the Swiss Reformed Church. And then there was a house in between. Then there was Harley's Barber Shop. Then there was Stuart Miller's store. And they sold gas, all kinds of stuff. They had groceries, shoes, overshoes, clothes. I don't think they sold suits, but anything you needed, anything a farmer needed, you could buy in there. And they also sold gas and kerosene. They go across the street was Scher's hardware store, and behind that was John Deere. That was run by Surbuck, and he was the son-in-law to the Schers. But that didn't stay in business very long, and he quit. And then was Grubbin and Paulson's grocery and dry goods store. And they were similar to Stewart's, but they didn't have the inventory that Stewart's did. And upstairs was the Masonic Temple. They had their quarters upstairs there. Then the rest of the land on that block was owned by Dr. Sharp. He had his office plus his office plus his living quarters. You go across the street on the north side of Verona Avenue on Main Street was the Bank of Verona. And in that bank there was also the post office. That Matz was the postmaster at that time. And John Miller was, I didn't say that, but John Miller was the head of the bank at that time. And upstairs was the telephone office, and Hetty Shetler run that. So that little building had a lot of stuff going on. In the west was Henry Youngblood's shoe store. He fixed shoes. And he was a crippled fellow, but he got along pretty good. Lived by himself. Then was the Schumann building, and that's where I was in the barber shop. But J.C. Brown had the half of that. Everything was cut in half at that time, it seemed. And next to us was I think it was, they said that had been a blacksmith shop run by a Schumann before that. But Bob Haldeman was the mechanic and owner. He didn't have any help. He did it all by himself. And John Miller used that for his service on his Plymouth cars. He sold Plymouth cars at that time. And up the street a ways was Dr. Wildens' doctor office and living quarters. That's now the Dragger attorneys is there now. And across the street on Schumann Street was the Woodman's Hall. And that, our basketball boys played basketball there. It wasn't much of a place. And they'd have dances there. And, it was used for wrestling matches, boxing matches, and whatever. About this time, they built the high school, and it was built in '36, I think. And then, of course, at that time, we had one of the nicest gyms around. But that's a long time ago. Now we go to the east side of Main Street. The first business place there was Stolen's Feed. And that's in where the plumbing shop is now. It's a building is identical to what it was then. Half of that was Bill Wild's blacksmith shop. Then there was a couple of houses, and there was the Schwartz harness and shoe repair. The harness was going out pretty fast at that time, but he still repaired harness. Then there was the Hendricks furniture store. That's where the eating place is now and bar. He had furniture and paint, and half of that building was a funeral home, because he was also the funeral director. Charlie Fischel's bowling alley, and that was one of the only new buildings in Verona at that time. And that was pretty nice for those days. And they had a ice cream parlor. They served hamburgers. Mrs. Fischel would fry it upstairs and run them hamburgers up and down those steps. She must have stayed in good shape. Andrew Huff was in the Schutz building. He had a very narrow area of that building and lived in the back. He made furniture, fixed furniture, and he could make some awfully good furniture. Kunstmann was in the other part of that building. That he had the bigger part, and he had the grocery store at that time. And next to the Eagle's Nest, that was run by Fred Nicholson when we moved here, but he didn't stay long, and then he sold out to a Swiss couple, and they didn't make a go of it. And then Jim Scher and Chuck Scher bought it, but Chuck only stayed a year, and then Jim run it till he retired. And on the corner was a filling station, and Harold Gust was running that. I don't know what kind of gas it wasn't, Mobile, but that he didn't stay there long either, because it did. Well, it was like all the filling stations. All he done is sell gas. I don't know if even they had a pit to change oil, but. And across the street, Fred Roethlisberger had bought that house from Gus, and they built a new house for the farm. And he had a filling station. He had a dugout place where they changed oil in the winter time, no matter what the weather was. Must have been a cold job. And Doc Schutz was up on Main. That building is still there, dentist office, and he lived there. Now going east, Albert Gust had a milk house, and that's where he operated his. They delivered mail, delivered milk around Verona at that time, and Jack Rood was his son-in-law. He was running that at the time. And then there was Hefty's garage, and I don't think that wasn't over 20 feet from where the cows went out of the barn, but kind of tight quarters. South of the highway on the corner of Franklin, and there was an old barn of some kind. The guy sold gas there, but they didn't last long after we got here. But they did sell gas for a while. At that time, Verona didn't have any water meters. It didn't make any difference how much water you used, paid the same amount. But it wasn't long after I got here they changed that. You had to pay for what you used. Bill Bumke took care of the waterworks and street work. There wasn't much. They didn't have any equipment to fix anything, do anything with. We shoveled. We got snow. We shoveled our way out. There was nobody. Once in a while, if it got too bad, they'd get the county in to open the streets up. Bill was also a constable, so if somebody got rowdy, they'd have to get him out and straighten things out. George Schabacher had the dray line. He hauled all the freight from, and most of the stuff come in by train, so he had a truck. He also had ice house where he sold ice. There were a lot of people using ice yet. They didn't have refrigerators yet. We didn't have one when we first moved here. The stores were open Wednesday and Saturday night. No closing date. They stayed. There was nobody around, and there was no Sunday. Nobody was open on Sunday. No store open. You couldn't buy groceries on Sunday. The biggest entertainment at that time was baseball. We always had a good baseball team, and they played up by the high school, and they had a big following. There was quite a few people came to the baseball game. If there was here, and they had some. They never had no night playing because we had no lights. The big deal for the year was the fireman's picnic. And we had that up by the high school. Of course, we had a baseball game. We had a beer tent let us out in the street because you couldn't have it on the school property. And a lunch stand. Bill Miller and I always run that. We opened at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, and we worked till 10 o'clock or whenever we got done at night. In '36, they built the high school. That was built by PWA. Doc Sharp he did a terrific business. He had people coming from all over. He was open every day, including Sundays. He'd go out in the country in the morning and wait on people, and then he'd be in that office till 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I always went over there on Friday night to get a shot for him. I don't know what he shot in me, but it did help for a day or two. I had hay fever so bad. I went over there one night. He said, "Yeah, I'll give you a shot, but you got to help me with this fella. He's drunk and he's all cut up." We had him on the table, and he says, "You hold him down now." And I said, "Aren't you going to give him something?" He's had too much already. Man, you could hear him holler for blocks. We got him sewed up. I saw him afterwards. He healed up pretty good. We had 3 deaths in one day, and I'm pretty sure that wasn't 36. I couldn't be sure of that. But Eichel Crowd had a farm down by Pula. He'd walk down there every day and do something. He'd come home that day, went down in the basement, and must have had a heart attack and died. They called Sharp, of course, and Doc said, that's the way I'd like to go. Well, he went out in the country, somebody was sick, and he got stuck, and he had a heart attack. Shoveling, he got a heart attack and died. So he got his wish the same day. Then John Shuttler died that same day, but he'd been sick a while. That was expected, but these other 2 fellas were seemingly healthy guys, but they had, Hendricks had 3 funerals, 3 bodies at one time. I think that's the only time that ever happened in Verona, even now I've never remembered. In 1940 I bought the Schutz property in the corner of Franklin and Verona, and I sold half of that lot to Andrew Huff. Paid $1,000 for the whole lot, and I sold him half for $500. I don't know where I got the $500, but I must have got a hold of it some way, because this was in 1940. And then that fall, my dad said, well, you better dig your basement now. You got a lot of Tuesday and Thursday nights, you aren't doing anything anyway. You might as well get somebody with a team of horses and dig that. So Weber used to work for Albert. We had his horses. Weber and I dug the basement that fall. The next spring, my dad said, no, you got to get a contractor to build it. Well, I got a guy from Mount Horeb. He couldn't do it, but I got another couple of guys from Mount Horeb, and I think the bill for the whole house was $500. They figured 75 cents an hour. And God, I was glad when they got that thing. You know, they saw everything was done by hand. Your studs come, they had to cut them, they had to cut the rafters, and with a hand saw. God, you wonder how they got it done, but they did. And by the 1st of August, they were supposed to have it done, and they did. Well, then Walter Klein lived with Wiesenbergs downstairs, and he said, why don't you build your own kitchen cabinets? I said, I don't know anything about building cabinets. I've been cabinet work, but nothing like that. I'll help you. So he helped me, and I built my own cabinets. They turned out pretty good. They're still in there. Anyhow, my wife had some women in. Mrs. Durfer was there, and she said, well, he's got to build me some too. So that's how I got started in the cabinet business. We worked in the basement for a while, and we got kicked out of there, and then we built the cabinet shop. And I had that till I sold out to college. Well, I had young kids and old retired guys helping. We did quite a business out of a garage. That's where we worked out of. Then, of course, World War II came around, and things really changed. There was less barbers around, and you could work as long as you wanted, because there were a lot of places run 3 shifts, so you never run out of work. I worked as late as 2 o'clock in the morning, but I only did that once, and my foreman said you can't do that no more. So then I went to work at Truax Field. I worked there for 4 or 5 months, and then they run out of soldiers out there. So I told the guy I'd just soon not come in here. I'd sooner give this to some of these fellas that need it. I said, I got plenty of work at home. So I quit. Don't you know, in a couple of weeks they got 10,000 soldiers, and they called me back. Well, then I didn't want to go back because I didn't like it out there. I didn't like, you didn't make much anyway. My biggest check out there was $25 a week, driving to Madison, and working with the guys I worked with wasn't much fun, so I didn't go. But then I got drafted and was supposed to be in the Navy. Well, decided to take a couple of days and go up north and see my aunt, and got back and I got a notice induction postponed 30 days. I got that for about a year and I never did get out of Verona, which was a good thing. Then Albert Gust sold part of, well, he quit farming. He sold, I think he sold most of his land. I can't remember who got all of it, but I know Bill Hefty had some. And then they put in Franklin Street up to where, that's the way it is now. And George Batker bought a lot because his brother died and that went out of business. They sold that and the root beer stand went in on the corner. And one of the fellows was Soper from Blanchardville, but I can't remember the name of the other guy. So that was the first A&W in Verona. And then all of a sudden they couldn't find anybody to be president. I had been on the village board a couple of, but I didn't particularly like it. So they finally talked me into it. And I don't think it was 2 days after election, I had a good friend by the name of Albert Daly. He was from Daleville, and he was on the county board. Had been on there for years. 2 years, about 2 days afterwards, he come in and he says, "You know, you took on quite a job here." And he says, "Verona's made a lot of mistakes, and if you don't straighten them out, you're going to pay for it." So he started to tell me, he says, "You should never let anybody plot anything without having the curb and gutter in ahead of time. And you're going to find that out when you put the curb and gutter on Franklin Street. Some of those houses are going to be sitting up in the air." I never thought of that. I hadn't thought of any of this. And he says, "That's not the only problem you got." He says, "Emma's been underwater every spring for years, and Stewart has been trying to get the county to do it, and the county's never going to put that on for you, so you better do that right away. But the first thing you got to do is get rid of your engineer. That's the reason you're in this fix, because you had a poor engineer." Good. So he recommends Strand and Associates. The first meeting, I brought all this stuff up, and I didn't take credit for it because I wouldn't have known any more than the rest of them. We hired Strand and Associates, and we made that nobody could plot anything without having curb and gutter in. So we thought we'd leave the storm sewer till a later date, which we did. But we did put in the storm sewer a little later. It had a lot of stuff to go through before you could do that. It's up there behind, well, everybody knows where it is now, by the cemetery. We haven't had any trouble since. Well, the streets weren't marked anywhere, and there's new additions, no streets, so we decided to have street signs put in and numbered all the houses. Now, I can't tell you that I'm giving this in the way that we did it, because I'm not sure of my. And about this time, Carnes came in. He bought a little building down there that was a block factory. He was going to build, and we had to get more land. So I worked with him a lot. He was a wonderful man to work with, and we got to be good friends. And when he sold out for $1 million, that was a lot of money back then. It wouldn't amount to much today, but it was a lot of money back then. And then at the same time, Ellis Company come in. They made tobacco platters. They went in where Batker Garage and plumbing business had been. And now that's got to be quite a business. The old man had 2 sons. One of them was pretty good. And he I don't know what he designed bandsaws. They make bandsaws. They do a lot of things now that I don't know anything about it anymore, because I haven't followed any of this stuff. Well, we had to get a contractor, and we hired a young fellow by the name of Parisi. just starting in the business, but he was a very good guy. So he was putting in, he was here the whole first year I was in. He started in the Miller edition, we put that in first, then went to the Lyons edition, Lyons and Schweitzer and Neff. They weren't any of them very easy to deal with. They were awful upset when they had to put in their, can't say it now, but curb and gutter. Finally got it. Anyway, Precy did the best he could. We had a rainy day and got to be fall, and we made another mistake letting they'd sold these lots ahead of time, and we let them build. And golly, we were in there, there were houses, and there's no gravel on the store. Well, we couldn't get gravel until we got the curb and gutter in, and they were getting stuck, and it wasn't very healthy being around. Well, then we had this meeting, and the lawyer says, you got to advertise for 30 days. I said, you couldn't stand it around here another 30 days without getting something on. I woke up about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I decided I knew how to do it. So I went out to Hammersley, and I told him, I said, how much gravel can I get for $499? So he gave me the figure. This was about 6 o'clock. I went over to Watson. He wasn't there till 7, so he come in. His price was a few dollars higher, and I said, Stu, you got to get it down to Hammersley's bid. And he did. And I said, when can you do that? We can go right away. But by the time I got home, Hammersley had his graders in, and by 10:30 it was all gravel. Because the work wasn't that plentiful at that time. There wasn't that much. Then I was cutting Ray Palmer's hair one day, and he said, the village ought to buy that gravel pit. I'll sell it to you for $1,500. Well, we were going to have a meeting that particular night, and I brought that up, and they all thought, well, that'd be a good buy. I think it was about 17 acres. So we bought it. Then the next meeting, we had some other meetings. We got talking a bunch. There's no money. We could stand the $1,500, but we didn't have anything. So we decided we were going to do it with free labor and as much free stuff as we could get. So Frank Stewart set that up. He got county equipment. We could use it on Saturday. And we had guys working for the county. They donated their work. And everybody pitched in. I can remember Luganville laid the block, and we mixed mud and what have you on Saturdays. I never worked on Saturday. I did a lot of work at night, and Sundays we used to go down. And we got it, so the next year could use it, and it's a beautiful park today. They've done wonders with that too. Another thing we had to do something about was the fire department. We didn't have a fire. We had that little building there. It's 2 apartments, or is it 1 apartment? I don't know. And we had a room for a truck and a jail, and that's where all the bums slept in there. And then upstairs, that's where we'd have our meetings, and we'd have card parties and whatever. So we got those 2 lots on Schumann Street. Then we went to Beloit to look at building. We built one identical to one Beloit had at that time. We got a pretty good deal on the plans, and that was on there. And I thought that would be good for life. I guess it wasn't, because it's long gone. And then we had to buy a fire truck. I'm sure that was bought that year. We couldn't have one before that because we didn't have fire stations. We bought a fire truck. And since then, we've had a pretty good fire department. I must hand it to them. When I was on the fire department when I first was here, and we didn't, well, they might as well let us not go because we didn't have nothing to work with after we got there. Those mostly older fellas. We had an international truck that wouldn't go over 35 miles an hour downhill, so it took us forever to get there. And I think that covers pretty much everything I did when I was in. And you asked me a question about what I thought Verona had done. I think they've done a wonderful job. They've got a lot of industry, and I think they've done a good planning. Getting EPIC is bound to be a big thing for Verona in the future. There's only one thing I complain about. You don't keep the sidewalks clean anymore. Back when I was president, and always afterwards, if you didn't shovel your sidewalk, we hired somebody to shovel it. They paid for that a couple of times. They shoveled pretty good. I think the village has done the city now, done a good job with the streets. I didn't think they did that well this winter, but they never saw snow before, so they'll probably learn that you have to keep it wide in the sort, or else you don't have much street by spring. That's about all I can give you at this time, and thank you for listening.